for our ASP.NET Core MVC app. In this tutorial, we're going to add a view to that controller. In order to start, let's go ahead and move back to our code and find the Hello World controller that we were using earlier. We'll want to change the index method a little bit. Instead of returning a string, we'll want to return an iActionResult, which will allow us more dynamic control over exactly what we want to do. And then instead of returning a static string, we'll return a view. And this is the view that we'll be creating in today's video. So now that we have changed up our controller to support view insertion, let's go ahead and add a new view to our ASP.NET app. In order to do that, let's move to our Views section in the Explorer and create a new folder which we'll name Hello World. Inside of this Hello World folder, let's go ahead and create a new file and name it index.cshtml. Now the thing that separates HTML files from CS HTML files is that HTML files don't natively support any sort of C# or ASP.NET features, whereas CS HTML files do. Which is going to be really important as we add a more dynamic view over the course of this tutorial. The first thing that we'll want to do in this empty file is paste in some of the starter code that comes from Microsoft's tutorial, again linked in the description. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and test out our new view. We can simply refresh our MVC app. Which should open up to our standard index. And then if we move to Hello World, you'll see that in place of just some static text, we now have a header, a footer, along with some information that we put in, hard-coded in to our index.cs HTML file. With that done, let's go ahead and add some more functionality to this. The first thing that we'll want to do is change some of the headers, footers, and titles of the tab. As you can see here, they all say MVC Movie, which is great for now, but since we're developing a movie app, let's change them to indicate that. To do this, all we have to do is go to our shared folder within Views and change the layout. Here, instead of having our title include MVC Movie, let's change it to Movie App. We'll do the same thing with our nav bar. And finally, we'll do the exact same thing with our footer. We can go ahead and reload our changes, and we should see that in place of MVC Movie, we now have Movie App in the title, the header, and the footer. And indeed, this changes across different tabs. So we have in our privacy policy, the movie app appended onto the end of the title with the same movie app in both the header and the footer here. Awesome. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and add some more functionality to this controller and this view. In order to do that, all we need to do is move to our viewStart.cs HTML file or our index.html file, which you can find within the newly created folder. We'll want to change our title from index to movie list, and we'll change it here from index to movie list again. As you can see, if we move to Hello World, originally our movie app says index right here, which is not desired. If we go ahead and refresh our page, we'll see that this change has been made as soon as we go to Hello World. Awesome. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and work on passing data from the controller that we made in the last video to this current view. In order to do that, we'll need to change some of the controller so that it supports greater functionality. Let's start by changing the welcome method. Inside of the welcome method, we already have a few parameters which we can use for dynamic control of the view. In order to do that, we can't be returning a string though. Instead, we need to return an iActionResult just as we did with the index. Because we changed that, we'll also need to change our return statement. First, let's start by declaring a few variables. The viewData variable or type is a really great way to do this because it's dynamic and can take in parameters. So we'll define our message to be equal to hello plus the name that was input dynamically. And we'll also create another view data type, which we can name num times. And we'll set this equal to the num times variable that's passed in. And last but not least, we can return this view just as we did with the last view in index. Once that's done, we'll need to have a way of depicting these changes somehow in our view. In order to do that, let's go ahead and create a new view template for the welcome method. We can go ahead and move to our hello world directory, create a new file, which we'll name welcome.cshtml. Again, we can go ahead and use a little bit of the starter code that Microsoft provides us, linked in the description below. Save that, and what we see here is a for loop. So in addition to our header that says welcome, we're going to have a for loop that increments through the number of times that was passed in as a parameter, and for each time that we increment, we will show the message variable that we defined just a little bit earlier. If we go ahead and reload this page, we should see the results pretty quickly. All right, okay. So now that we have this new web page, we can go ahead and open it. And if we go to the welcome screen, we see that hello is only printed once, and there is no other information passed in. That's because if we go back to the code, if we go back to our hello world controller, we see that if there's no name passed in, then just the word hello will be printed. And if there's no num times specified, then the num times defaults to 1. Now, importantly, if we change this URL query just a little bit, we can see why this functionality can be so important. As before, we'll set our name to Rick and num times equal to 4. And here we see hello Rick printed to the screen 4 times. And of course, this is dynamic. So if we wanted to print Rick to the screen just 2 times, we could do that. Or we could even print it to the screen as many as 100 times. And all of this is done dynamically and easily through our controller. So now that you know how to use a view and a controller, in the next video we'll cover models and how to use them effectively alongside both models, views, and controllers.